But going back to the beginning, in 1996, it was the day of a hearing in Canton. Ellen had heard from a friend that the mayor was interested in revisiting the issue of fluoridation. We have been fluoridated for a number of years. Ellen had no idea that that was happening. A friend of hers twisted her arm to get her involved. She, in turn, reached out across the country to various people that she knew to get as much information about fluoride as she could. She had had her own dossier. She had tracked many issues, environmental issues herself, clippings and things. So she had that, but then the input from others. And at this point, she gets this bundle of stuff and puts it on my desk and says, Paul, I want you to help with this. And I said, what is it? And she said, fluoridation. I said, take that away. These people are crazy. And that's the prevailing, it's a technique. People have exploited very effectively for many, many years. Intimidation, keeping dentists and doctors and scientists and people in general away from the literature. Give them a reason for not even starting to read. Those rolling eyes are meant to say, don't embarrass yourself. Don't get involved with this issue because they're all crazy people. And unfortunately, psychology, embarrassment is a very powerful factor in our lives. We don't like to be embarrassed. We don't like to be embarrassed in public. Now, from my point of view, I'm a professor of chemistry. I'm already a little bit on the edge because of my work with dioxin. I had the temerity to challenge the notion that whilst dioxin was bad for animals, it was okay for human beings. That was Dow's way of ridiculing people, not to get involved with dioxin. Anyway, and also I was pretty busy. I was teaching chemistry throughout the week, and I was traveling a lot with this waste issue. I didn't really want another issue, and certainly one, as I said, that stigmatized me as being Looney Tunes, being a professor in a small town. Anyway, Ellen prevailed. I read the literature. I was astounded. I was shocked. I was embarrassed to feel that I'd gone along with this notion that the opponents of fluoridation were crazy, when in fact, they're quite sane. I mean, obviously you get crazy people in any issue, but by and large, the people opposed to fluoridation were sound. It's an unethical practice to force people to take a medicine, which remains the number one argument. And number two, I started to quickly see that the science made the practice preposterous. The science which said that fluoride was very toxic, that scientists had used fluoride in their experiments to inhibit enzymes. We even had a statement from one of the leading enzyme chemists of his day in the 1950s, James Sumner at Cornell, who said, you don't want to put that in the water because fluoride is what poisons enzyme, which eventually makes people sick and kills them. So you don't want to do that. Anyway, and there were a couple of other things which really struck me. It was about the time that John Emsley had produced an article, or at least Ellen had dug it up, which shows that fluoride formed a strong hydrogen bond. Now, hydrogen bonds are these little bonds in nature which hold macromolecules like proteins and nucleic acids together. They offer the shape and they dominate the function of molecules because the hydrogen bonds are easy to make and break exactly what you want in life. You want things which easily flow backwards and forwards. And so when I saw that fluoride inhibited hydrogen bonds, that's not a good thing to put in our water, put in our bodies. And then another thing which gave it away was the very low level in mother's milk. It was extremely low. It meant that a woman who bottle fed her baby using formula and tap water would give her baby about 200 times more fluoride than nature intended. And I did not believe then, and I still don't believe, that nature would have been so dumb as to not give us fluoride if it was beneficial to teeth or anything. And it turns out, I don't know if it was then or later, you find there's nobody has ever identified any process, anything happening in our bodies that needs fluoride. The only one place that fluoride seems to do possibly some good is the topical interaction between the fluoride ion and the enamel after the teeth have erupted. So it's a topical mechanism. It's nothing to do with nature, nothing to do with internal biochemistry. And, you know, nature is very effective at using the substances that come along its way. And there was no shortage of fluoride. Fluoride is the 13th most abundant element in the Earth's crust. And therefore, the fact that nature go through all this biochemistry of life and not given some kind of role to fluoride was preposterous. No, I didn't believe that. Anyway, we've got since learned a lot. So that propelled me into action. I went with Ellen that night to the village board meeting. The guy that put the fluoride in the water didn't want it. The water director, he had brought in Dr. Yamayanis and the guy from the New York Department of Health. The two of them went head to head. We had dentists in the audience swearing up and down that fluoride is the best thing since sliced bread. What's the difference in fluoridation and chloridation? Blah, blah. Anyway, much to my surprise, they did not stop fluoridation on that date, and it took us 7.5 years to get it out. But meanwhile, I'm fired up, and we started to essentially reproduce what we've done successfully with work on waste and fighting incineration. We realized we needed a network. Immediately, I reached out to other scientists, other activists around the United States and around the world, and said we must form a coalition here. I produced a newsletter for them. It was called the International Fluoride Information Network, IFIN. I put out about 800 bulletins with everything we could think of. And all of that was happening over a few years from 1996 until it was consolidated in 2000, where we actually formed the Fluoride Action Network. And at that point, my son volunteered to do the web page, and he set up the health database, and the rest, as you say, was history. But that's how it started, and we copied our successful work with dioxin and incineration in another way. We set up citizens' conferences on dioxin. I think we had 3. They were very effective at bringing scientists, the best scientists, to the public, so the public could hear the science from the best minds. And at the same time, the scientists could see the victims of incineration, the people that were being hurt by toxic emissions that the government was denying. That's important too. So a two-way conversation. And we've done that the same with the citizens' conferences on fluoride, some of which have been very, very good. And I hope you won't let history forget that I think it was the 2006 conference, which got 4 pages in the Chemical and Engineering News from Betty Heilman, the science editor of that time for Chemical and Engineering News, which is a journal that goes to every member of the American Chemical Society. So no small potatoes that this 4-page article, which really, it was the citizens' way of responding to the National Research Council report. That came out in 2006, NRC 2006. And we had 3 of the scientists were authors of that report. We had, we had Kathleen Thiessen, we had Hardy Limeback, and we had the guy who's passed away now from Binghamton University. What was his name? Ellen? Forgotten his name, but lovely fellow. Those 3 all spoke at our conference, our citizens' conference on fluoride. And the whole issue of networking is so, so important, and citizens helping other citizens, communities helping other communities. And you know when you've got a network, when people genuinely are upset when another community loses, and genuinely excited when they win, then you have a network.
And your organization started with handwritten, probably newsletters, and still probably doing the mailings, and has evolved into email and social media. And you present to the York Council, and you presented to the NRC, and that ultimately resulted, in the HHS dropping the optimal level in half after 8 years. It took them 8 years to acknowledge that. You accomplished, getting the EPA to agree that they should phase out fluoride, although some games were played with that. Yep. And look at all the stuff that's been accomplished. You've helped hundreds and hundreds of communities end fluoridation around the world, and this lawsuit is all mounted into this one. It's all coming together in this perfect storm of the NTP report, which fan petitioned, and this lawsuit that we're probably going to win this year. So
yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, scientific integrity will out. We have to have that. Our society really hinges upon having integrity, especially in science, and especially science which is meant to inform public health decisions. And if you allow that rift to continue, which has started with fluoridation, there's a huge rift between what the science says and what the regulators are saying. But I think our judge, who's given us a level playing field, is going to rule in our favor. And I believe that the NTP and the NIEHS will be protected. The public must protect the agencies that are doing science, honest science, as opposed to the regulatory bodies that very quickly become victims of the lobbies, the industry lobby, the pharmaceutical industry, the chemical industry, you name it. These industries have captured, by and large, the FDA, the EPA, CDC, and others. But the fight back, definitely the fight back, is fluoridation, and we should get the biggest victory in that fight back next year, 2023. Stuart, keep up your good work. I have to go. I have another interview.
I know. Well, it's an honor to know you and Ellen, and I really appreciate you giving me some time today, and our supporters for this interview, to learn more about you and the origins of FAN and the activist work. So thank you very much on behalf of everybody at FAN.